So the Seventh Circuit has now made efforts to avoid the Supreme Court reviewing the Illinois assault weapon and magazine ban case. Right now, the Supreme Court has a case sitting in front of them that could ultimately end up striking down all of the assault weapon and magazine bans nationwide. That critical case is called NAGR v. the City of Naperville, and it's a challenge to a city ordinance which bans so-called assault weapons and so-called large capacity magazines, and it's also a lawsuit which challenges the state of Illinois' PIC Act, which also bans rifles and magazines statewide. And the Supreme Court has the ability to grant immediate emergency review of this case, but the Seventh Circuit has just issued an order which is essentially an effort of the Seventh Circuit to avoid that Supreme Court review. Now, before we dive deeper into this important development, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Lear Capital. Last year was a terrible year for most investors, and 2023 could be even worse with the talk of an upcoming recession. One of the tools that you can actually use to hedge your bets is investing in gold and other precious metals, and Lear Capital can help you with those efforts. With over 25 years of experience and a risk-free guarantee that gives you 24 hours to review your purchase, Lear Capital is what I recommend if you're starting to buy gold and you're getting into it for your first time. So head on over to Lear Capital by calling 1-800-920-8388 or by going to learscholar.com. For those not aware, this all involves an important battle which is now seeking Supreme Court intervention to overturn assault weapon and magazine bans. These lawsuits would impact not only the state of Illinois and their ban, but it would also have huge impacts and implications for other states and other state bans on these items like California, New York, Washington, Oregon, and others. This NAGR lawsuit is a challenge to the Protect Illinois Communities Act, or the PIC Act, and also the City of Naperville's ordinance, which bans so-called assault weapons and also so-called large capacity magazines. In the NAGR case, the plaintiffs originally filed for a motion for preliminary injunction at the district court level. A preliminary injunction is a way to temporarily halt the enforcement of a law, and that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to temporarily halt the enforcement of the assault weapons ban and also the magazine ban. However, on review, a district court denied the plaintiffs' motions for a preliminary injunction. The plaintiffs in NAGR then appealed the district court's denial of the injunction up to the Seventh Circuit. This is what's known as an interlocutory appeal. It's essentially an appeal on a motion being denied rather than an appeal on a final resolution of a case. This case then went to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, where the plaintiffs also filed for a motion for an injunction pending an appeal that is currently taking place at the Seventh Circuit. But the Seventh Circuit, on review, also denied the injunction. And as a result of that denial by both the District Court and the Seventh Circuit, the plaintiffs in NAGR are now seeking emergency immediate review up to the Supreme Court. What this means is that the plaintiffs in the NAGR case want the Supreme Court to step in and find that the District Court and the Seventh Circuit should have granted their injunction in this case. And therefore, they want the Supreme Court to issue the injunction on their own. Of course, if the Supreme Court did that, that would have huge implications, not just for this state ban, but essentially all state bans, and would even essentially do away with any talks of a national ban. This emergency application is similar to what we saw GOA do in the New York concealed carry case, Antonyuk. In that case, the Supreme Court denied the emergency application, but we got statements from Justice Alito and Justice Thomas. They told the Second Circuit that they could not just flippantly grant stays on injunctions like they did in the Antonyuk case. Instead, Justice Alito told them that they needed to either write an order that actually outlines their rationale for why they are granting a stay, or they must expedite the hearings on all those cases. Now, we're going to come back to this because that prior statement by the Supreme Court is critical to what the Seventh Circuit just did to try and avoid Supreme Court review in the NAGR case. Now, this NAGR emergency application was submitted to Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and she demanded that the city and state of Illinois respond to that emergency application. That means she is demanding that the state of Illinois and the city of Naperville answer to why they believe this application should be denied, why they believe the assault weapon ban and the magazine ban is in fact constitutional, and how the lower courts were correct in denying the injunction. It also shows that she's at least intrigued in this case, and now the parties have submitted all of their briefs to Justice Barrett, and we're waiting to see how she will respond. But with that backdrop, we also got some important news in the Barnett v. Raul case, and that is the Seventh Circuit case. In Barnett, the case was ruled in our favor, which means that the district court judge found that the state ban on rifles and magazines was in fact a violation of the Second Amendment. However, the state then went around that district court judge and sought an emergency stay from the 7th Circuit. And what ended up happening is a single anti-gun 7th Circuit judge just flippantly granted a stay, which means that now the ban on rifles and magazines is back in effect. To make matters even worse, the state of Illinois is now saying that they will enforce the ban against anyone who purchased or came into possession of items during the almost week-long period where the injunction was in place. And after making those statements, the 7th Circuit issued an order which consolidated all of the Illinois assault weapon ban cases and magazine ban cases that are currently seeking appeals. The court also set a hearing on the cases to take place on June 29th. Now, you may be asking yourself, why is this action by the 7th Circuit important, and why does it have any impact or any implications for the NAGR case, which is currently seeking Supreme Court review? Well, what is happening here is the 7th Circuit is taking a play out of the 2nd Circuit's playbook. As I mentioned earlier, we saw something like this play out very recently in the New York CCIA lawsuit called Antonyuk. In that case, the 2nd Circuit issued a blanket stay on an injunction, which then struck down the New York concealed carry laws in New York, very similar to what just happened in Illinois. An emergency application then went up to the Supreme Court, but after direction by the Supreme Court, the 2nd Circuit then consolidated all of these CCIA challenges and then held expedited hearings on all of those cases. That is exactly what the 7th Circuit is doing here in the Illinois cases. And they are doing this, they are consolidating the cases and expediting a hearing to take place on June 29th to essentially avoid Supreme Court review and intervention in the granting of immediate application and the emergency application in the NAGR case. Strategically, this was smart by the 7th Circuit to try and avoid the Supreme Court from stepping in right here and now in all these cases. Traditionally, the Supreme Court does not like to take on interlocutory issues like we are dealing with here, which is a preliminary injunction issue. They often prefer final resolution cases. There are sometimes situations where the Supreme Court may in fact step in on preliminary injunction issues or interlocutory issues. But traditionally, what it needs to happen is essentially they need to see that the lower courts are just simply not proceeding forward with the case, maybe extremely slow walking the process, and also that there is injury suffered to the parties or one of the parties, and the injury is so severe that the Supreme Court needs to intervene almost immediately. But this order by the 7th Circuit helps the state of Illinois in its arguments that the Supreme Court is not needed right now because the 7th Circuit is hearing this case sooner rather than later. Now, I will say that there is still one major thorn in the side of all this that can maybe ruin this tactic. And I would say it's the fact that the state of Illinois and their response to the purchase of rifles and the purchase of magazines during the injunction period. The state is essentially threatening that they will act against anyone who came into possession of those items, and they will do that right here and now. Now, that probably is going to impact thousands of law-abiding gun owners in the state of Illinois who are potentially now subject to criminal liability just because they purchased those items during the injunction period. Now, this overreach by the state of Illinois is still something that could push the Supreme Court in the NAGR case or maybe in one of these other cases to intervene right here and now on an emergency basis because the injury that these individuals will suffer is so present, it's so real, and it's gonna happen right here and now. The state of Illinois' response shows that thousands of people will in fact be directly affected by the 7th Circuit granting that stay, and how the Supreme Court needs to step in. They need to grant an injunction and at least maintain the status quo to protect those individuals who are kind of falling subject to the procedures and the going back and forth of the procedures from the district court to the 7th Circuit, and the 7th Circuit just granting that flippant stay. So this is a really interesting situation where the Supreme Court, if they want, can step in right here and now and effectively strike a major blow to all magazine assault weapon bans nationwide. But the 7th Circuit and the state of Illinois are making every effort possible that they can to try and avoid that situation. And they're doing that by consolidating all the cases and expediting a hearing that will take place on June 29th, so at the end of next month. So we will wait anxiously to see what the Supreme Court ultimately decides to do in the NAGR case. All the briefs have been submitted to Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and now we will have to wait and see what they do. But if you want to learn more about what else is going on in the 2A world, you can watch some of these videos here on the screen. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.